I'm gonna tell you about every single enchant that was added to Blox Fruits in Update 20, as well as some secret enchantments that you definitely did not know about. Okay, so I'm pretty sure all of you already know what enchantments are. They're obviously a new thing that was added in Update 20, one of the biggest updates in the history of Blox Fruits. And the way you enchant your weapons is by using scrolls and talking to an NPC called the Dragon Talon Sage. This NPC is located at the Tiki Outpost Island, the new island that was added to the 3rd sea. Now I'll talk a bit about the enchantments, and there's a butt ton of them, so lock in. Alright, the very first enchantment we got here is called Agile, and this reduces cooldowns by 6%. And that's only the level 1. For level 2, it reduces the cooldowns by 9%, and for the level 3, it reduces the cooldowns by 12%. And the way you put this enchantment on a weapon is by getting a scroll that has this enchantment. Next enchantment we got here is called Beast, and what this does is it increases the damage dealt to Beast users. And if you guys don't know, Beast is a category of devil fruits. Simply any fruit that has a transformation. Stuff like the Falcon, Buddha, Leopard. You know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Alright, for the stage 1, increases the damage by 3%. For stage 2, it's 6%. For stage 3, it's 9%. For stage 4, it's 12%. And for stage 5, it's 15%. Next up, we got the Deadly Enchant. And for this one, it increases the overall damage that you do to players. For stage 1, you got a 2% increase. For stage 2, you got a 4% increase. For stage 3, you got a 6% increase. For stage 4, you got an 8%. And for stage 5, you got a 10% increase. And this seems like a really small amount, but when you compare the overall damage that you do to someone, this is definitely going to help killing them. Next up, we got the Efficient Enchant, and what this does is increases the XP you get from NPCs. Stage 1 increases it by 15%, stage 2 by 30%, stage 3 by 45%, and stage 4 by 60%. That is overpowered if you get level 4. Next up, we got Elemental, and just like the Beast, this increases the amount of damage you do to everybody with an elemental fruit. Fruits like the Light, Ice, Flame, basically any fruit that's an element. For the stage 1, increases by 3%, for stage 2, 6%, for stage 3, 9%, for stage 4, 12%, and for stage 5, 15%. Next up, we got the Fortune Enchant, and I think you guys guess what this does. Increases the total amount of money that you get from NPCs. For level 1, increases by 15%. For stage 2, it's 30%. For stage 3, 45%. And for stage 4, 65%. Next up, we got the Lucky Enchant, and this increases the drop rates from NPCs. For level 1, we got a 5% increase. For level 2, we got a 10% increase. For level 3 and 4, it's actually unknown because no one's actually gotten those scrolls yet. But I'm guessing it should be like 20, and then level 4 like 40. Or maybe even 30, I'm not sure. Next up, we got the Natural Enchant, and just like the Beast and Elemental Enchant, this is for people that have a natural type devil fruit. And stage 1 increases the damage by 3%, stage 2 by 6, stage 3 by 9, stage 4 by 12, and stage 5 by 15%. Next up, we got the Piercing ability, and it ignores a certain percentage of defensive buffs. For level 1, it ignores 7% of defensive buffs. For level 2, it ignores 14%. For level 3, it ignores 21%. And for stage 4, it ignores 28%. Very solid scrolls in my opinion. Next up, we got the Sharp Enchant, and what this does is it increases the total damage that you do to NPCs. Level 1 increases by 3%, level 2 by 6, level 3 by 9, level 4 by 12, and level 5 by 15. Next up, we got the Siphon ability, and I think a lot of you should already know what this means if you play some other games. Siphon is basically when you regenerate a certain percentage of damage you do to someone. Say you have a 10% Siphon and you do 100 damage to a player, then you'll regenerate 10. So anyways, let's get into the levels. For level 1, you regenerate 4% of the damage you do. For level 2, it's 6. Level 3 and 4 are unknown because no one has those scrolls yet, but I'm guessing it should be 8, and the next one should be 10. Next up, we got the Vampire Enchant. For this one, you actually regenerate from your total health, so it's a lot better. Vampire Enchant only has 3 different levels. For the first one, you heal a total of 4%. For the level 2, you heal a total of 6%. And for the level 3, you heal 10%. Now let's get into the unique enchantments. And these are enchantments that are pretty hard to get. First one is called Masterpiece, and what this does, it makes your skills have no cost. The damage dealt is increased by 5%, and the cooldown is decreased by 8%. Next up, we got Rage, and what this does is it increases your speed when you deal damage to someone, and the duration scales with your base damage. Next up, we got the Sharpshooter Enchant, and this increases your damage by a total of 20%, but your cooldowns get 25% longer. So I'm not really sure if it's worth it, but in my opinion, it is. But overall, it totally depends on what type of fighting style you have. Next up, we got the Strong Grip Enchant. What this does is it damage scales with 40% of your melee stats and 60% of your gun and sword stat. Next up, we got the Unbreakable, and for this, held skills cannot be interrupted. Even if you're charging up an ability and someone hits you, you still charge up the ability. It doesn't really negate the damage that they do to you, it just stops you from wasting your ability. And you can charge it up fully before you slam your opponent with it. Next up, we got the Unreal Enchant, and this makes cooldowns 25% shorter, but the damage is decreased by 30%. Kinda worth it in my opinion. Just like before, it depends on your PvP style. Next up, we got the Blessing Enchants. The first one is called Burning, and what this does is it applies burn damage for 4 seconds when an attack lands, and the effect scales with the final damage. Next up, we got the Sea Enchant, and this applies seasickness to fruit users when an attack lands on them. And the effect obviously scales with your base damage. Next up, we got the Storm Enchant, and this chains lightning damage to people that are nearby you and when you land an attack on them. And this also scales with your final damage. Next up, we got the Frozen Enchant, and this applies slowness to your enemy when you attack them. Very solid ability in my opinion. Next up, we got the Curse Enchants, and the first one is called Curse of the Thief. This makes enemies always target you and deal extra damage. But the kill rewards like XP, money, and drop rate are increased greatly, and we don't know the percentage yet, but it's really good. Next up, we got Curse of the Reaper, and for this one, your health regeneration is cut in half, but you heal by 75% of the damage that you do. Kinda worth it, but if it's a prolonged fight, then probably not.